Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me. Hello. It's been a little while, and I have a reason for that. My mom was visiting, and so I spent as much time as possible with her and put all my other obligations on a daily basis to the wayside and just enjoyed my mom. So then I needed to recover for a couple days. So that brings us to now. This morning, I went to this amazing workshop that was headed by one of the authors in the authors club that I'm a part of in my neighborhood. And it was about joy. Her name is Lindsay Lennon, and she wrote a book called A Minute to Joy. It's a short book, and she has a PhD in social sciences or something to that effect. Anyway, she was a college professor and is just a young but very intelligent and nice person. So I went to a workshop that was based on this topic of her book, and there's going to be 4 workshops that I plan to go to. And today we talked about routine and habits and their relationship to joy and so forth. So it was a small workshop. There was about 10 of us in there, I think, but it was really, really fun. And I took some notes and tried to participate and answer questions and stuff. It was right down my alley as far as like stuff that interests me in my recovery. So I look forward to attending that for the next 4 weeks. Hopefully, I'll be able to attend all of them. And then, so that's what's been going on. How do I feel like symptom wise? Right now, I'm having some sharp pains in my head. So if you see me just shut my left eye, it's because that's where the sharp pains are. And I've been feeling cognitively pretty slow, difficult finding words. So we will just see how this goes, as you are used to. And I appreciate you joining me for today. The topic that I'm going to be talking about today is growing a conscience. What is your motivation as you go through your day? And so this is like about becoming more aware of our motives and their relationship to our behavior and then the impact on others. So in my recovery, I am learning how to stop living on impulse and start living with more intention, like thoughtful intention. Pausing before I do things and becoming more aware of why I'm doing things. Am I doing it because, with regard to the workshop that I went to this morning, am I doing this because it's just a habit? Or or am I doing it out of fear, ego? Am I doing it because I have a resentment? That's a big one. Am I doing it out of love? And I think one of the most difficult ones to answer as we become more self-aware is, am I being honest with myself when I do it, whatever it may be? So, my experience, and that's what I like to talk about here, my experience is that a lot of what I did before I got sober was out of fear. They were like behaviors um, that I subconsciously thought of as survival skills, sometimes consciously. I was drinking, for example, because I truly believed that I could not live without alcohol. And when I removed the alcohol, I am really having sharp pains in my head. This is a normal symptom that I have in my stroke recovery. So just bear with me as I think it's important that when I do this podcast, that I do it without editing and being really true to what I experience in stroke recovery on a daily basis with this vestibular disability that I have. So that's why sometimes I just stop and I tell you what I'm feeling and I don't edit it out because that is one of the most important parts of doing the podcast is to be able to connect with other people listening that are going through similar things, stroke recovery, uh, addiction recovery, all of these things. Vestibular, there's some of the audience is folks that have a vestibular disorder. So all of you are important, and I want to make sure that I share like all of my experiences as I talk through some of these lessons that I've learned in my recovery over the years. So once I got sober, some of these things that I thought I had to do to survive, I became more self-aware. I became um, more aware that what I had been doing, the behavior that I was doing that I thought was survival was actually hurting me, you know? I mean, it might be obvious to others, but it was not obvious to me, because alcoholism is a disease and the very thing that is killing us is the thing that's stopping us from healing as well and being aware like the alcoholism itself made me unaware that it was trying to kill me, as if it's this ghost that's trying to kill me, but that's what feels like a little bit. So once I removed the alcoholism, then what is driving my behavior? And it's some of the same stuff that I was doing when I was drinking, but remove the alcohol, now I can actually see it. I can actually see cause and effect. I can actually see, I can play the tape forward and see what what impact my choices are going to have on other people. So, I still had these, and I still have, I shouldn't talk in past tense. I still have these character defects, as we call them, in my sobriety program, where I have these reactions, these impulses that are driven by fear. That's a big one. They're driven by my need to control, my feeling that I need to control people, places, and things, when actually I can only control what's within my fingertips. I can't control anything outside of my fingertips. And what I try to do is sometimes I can get confused about like when it comes to people pleasing that I feel like, okay, well, I'm controlling what's within my fingertips. And if I do this and I please that other person, then I can change what they're feeling or what they're doing. And so I can be deceived into the idea that I can control other people simply by behaving a certain way. And I can't. And that's where we have expectations that aren't met. But I think that's another topic that we could talk about at another time. But My behavior can be like, as far as expectations, like I need validation, and or I just avoid things, because once again, because of fear. So addiction disconnected me from that conscience, because relief became my priority. And now that I stop needing to focus um, on satisfying that urge, I can actually look at what in my behavior is healthy and what's not. I'm no longer asking myself, how can I numb myself from feeling at all? I can start looking at myself honestly. I can start noticing patterns. Well, when this happens, when somebody treats me this way, this is the way that I behave. This is the way that I try to resolve or avoid the issue. I can start looking at my resentments. And in my morning meeting, my morning sobriety meeting, we talked about resentments this morning and how when I first got in the program, I was able to look at these resentments, these long-term resentments that I had been avoiding, that I had been drinking over. And I mentioned this morning how it's like over the course of my life, these resentments became like fossilized within me. And so it really takes work to remove the things that I had spent so long covering them up with, the drinking, the behaviors, the lying to myself, not being honest. Like that is the dirt that was covering those fossilized resentments. So to move all of that stuff away and really look at the resentment itself and figure out like, okay, we're going to look at this. It's going to hurt. I'm going to look at it. What was my role? There's always, I learned in my program that resentments are attached to a relationship, not a person. I mean, this is my interpretation. This is my experience that if I look at a resentment instead as a obstacle in a relationship rather than a person, like this, I'm resentful towards this person. Instead, I can be like, okay, this resentment is an obstacle. It's a growth. It's a nasty growth inside my relationship. What can I do to treat it? And the best thing, the only thing that I can do is look at my role. Because I can't control people, places, and things. What was my role and what can I do to smooth that over, to address it so that I'm not carrying it anymore. And if that other person still carries the resentment, that's not my issue. That's their issue. But I don't need to carry around a suitcase full of resentments anymore. I can um, I can address each and every one, each growth, that's gross, each growth and address that one. And then I can start living and, and living a little more honestly and healthy. um, I begin to minimize my unhealthy thinking. I'm human, so it's going to rear its ugly head probably on a daily basis. But I now have the tools, like I'm more self-aware to know that it's happening. And I can see myself a little more truthfully instead of drowning myself in shame and guilt and with just plain old, I'm not going to look at it. That awareness is uncomfortable, but when I allow myself to do it, to look at something truthfully and honestly, it's super freeing. Um, so, one of the things that I've learned also in my recovery is so that was kind of step 4. And in step 10, this is the one where I get to look forward. So that was looking at past resentments. This is like making sure that I don't build new resentments. So, um, how am I going into my day? What is my motivation for the things that I do? And it's before I do it, not after I do it. So recovery, this is exists inside the pause that I talk about all the time. So what is what is the motivation for something I'm gonna do before I do it? Am I going to call my mom? This is so simple of an example. Am I calling my mom because for me or for her? I This is really interesting to me because I can answer that question differently on a daily basis. Um, Am I making dinner? These are so simple. Am I making dinner for my husband or am I making dinner for me? Okay, these are like really basic ones. But if I go into like, let's see, I'm gonna send a card to, let's see, let me think this through. I'm gonna send a card to, I don't know, we'll call him Sam. I'm gonna send a card in the mail, snail mail, to somebody named Sam, who is an old friend of mine. Um, am I sending the card to Sam because I want to provide Sam with a little bit of joy on the day that he opens it? Or do I have ulterior motives for sending that card to Sam? For example, Sam has a boat, and I would really like to be invited to go on Sam's boat. So I think that if I build a relationship with Sam and his wife or something, I don't know. I'm just making it sound like I'm not trying to have an affair with Sam. um, Whoever Sam is. So if I want to send a card to Sam because I'm trying to get in on all the neighbors get to go on the boat, I want to go on the boat. So I'm going to start schmoozing with Sam. That the motive for my card is very different. And the resulting inner response that I have is based on my motive for doing things. So not only do I impact Sam, but I'm also impacting myself. Like my honest motive can create peace. Fear-based motives or deception-based motives create exhaustion and uneasiness. So when I was drinking, I didn't have a conscience. I was doing things for immediate satisfaction. My motive was to satisfy myself, to create, as I learned this morning, fleeting happiness. I learned this morning what the difference between joy and happiness is. And if you're a lifetime listener, I have always interchanged the two. I know they're not the same, but they're so similar that I was like, I don't know, whatever. Joy, happiness, whatever. It's all the same. It feels good. Well, my understanding is that, and I wrote it down in my remarkable tablet. Joy is more of an experience, and this is something that I have the way that I define it, and I think that this was similar to what Lindsay said this morning was that I define joy as something that we surface. That is something that is always in us, and if we can be self-aware and be honest with ourselves and address some pain and discomfort and stuff on a daily basis and like manage our lives in that way that we can surface joy. We can move the negative stuff out of the way and we can surface joy. And then there's happiness, which is like this fleeting feeling. So joy is like this uh experience, this surfaced experience, and happiness is this fleeting release of happy chemicals. That's why I call them happy chemicals because they're temporary. And she also shared about that feeling of buyer's remorse, she said, when you like buy a car and you have buyer's remorse and you go way up, you're super happy you bought the car and then you go down afterwards because it's like a temporary, fleeting release of dopamine. So she went on and on about it. I don't, if you want to find out more about Lindsay and her take on joy, again, she has this book that I would recommend called A Minute to Joy, Lindsay Lennon. Um, so anyway, back to me. So having a healthy conscience does not mean that all of my motives are always right or are always like I'm human still. But the healthy conscience means that I'm aware of my motives. And being aware of motives before I behave as a result of them um, allows me to behave in a more healthy way. Like, so instead of just reacting by impulse, I can have a healthy conscience and pause and choose the way that I'm going to behave. Maybe I'm going to choose to still react in a unhealthy way. Well, that's another issue where we are still acting on negative motives. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just being aware enough and honest enough with yourself and realizing what you're feeling and how you're reacting. Am I reacting? Is my behavior reacting or am I responding? And being able to pause between the two. Will my behavior create more chaos or can will I still have peace when all is done? So for me, I learned in my sobriety the meaning of emotional sobriety. And I'm able to reach that serenity more often because I've been learning how to pause and respond instead of react, like to have that reflection. And my freedom, my emotional freedom, the peace really comes from being able to create that time to be honest with myself and compare my impulses to my values. And that's where my integrity grows. Like I reduce guilt and secrets. I don't, you know, obsessive thinking, all of that stuff. I can reduce that by adding the pause. It's such a simple act, but when you've lived a life of living on impulse, I believed that that was the only way. I believed that that voice inside of me that was telling me, this person hurt your feelings, you need to fight. I thought that that voice was protecting me. I thought that that voice was instructions for me. And I learned in sobriety that they're not. I still have a choice. I didn't know that. Um, so the whole idea in sobriety of progress, not perfection, also allows me to make mistakes. Um, but if I keep trying to practice the pause, the growth will come when I start noticing faster that, oh, you know what? My motives weren't exactly good when I reacted that way. I can stop right now and I can make amends. You know, I can correct my behavior sooner when I am noticing my motives, when I become self aware. And I can practice staying willing to do that. So it's not learning how to do this and then becoming perfect out at it, but being more awake, being more awake to what my role is in my relationships, in the world around me. So this question, what is your motivation for that, is a very powerful question. And I think it takes practice to grow that conscience, to grow a sort of empathy and accountability and honestly, some honesty. Sometimes I can think that I'm being driven by the right motive, but then I slowly notice that I'm living on autopilot and I can stop at any time and reevaluate. And the fact that like this step 10 that allows me to look at my day on a daily on a on an hourly basis, on a minute by minute basis, like that's what it gets to. I get to this point where I can say something to somebody and I can actually think, I wonder if that came out wrong. I wonder if what I said might impact them in a different way than I intended. And sometimes I have gotten to the point, like when I was in my career, I would be talking to, I don't know, one of my staff members or one of my peers, and I would say something and I would say, I hope that came across as I intended. And that was all that I needed to that was kind of earlier in sobriety. I guess that was like in the first 5 years that I started being between 3 and 5 years, I started being so self-aware that I wanted to make sure that each thing that I said was very well intentioned and very thoughtfully acted upon. And sometimes I get out of that. But I think that it's such a peaceful way of living. I can end my day, before I go to bed and look back and think, well, who did I interact with today? And is there anything that I might have said or did that may have come across in a way that looks like it was ill-intended or my motives were different or whatever. Like I can look at all of that stuff and reflect on it and kind of check the box and be like, yeah, I'm okay with today. I'm okay with today. Time to go to bed. Tomorrow's a whole new day. It takes a lot of practice, but I love it. I love the practice, so I wanted to share about that today. So, thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you next time.